Today, Gemma and we are joined by Mike. And Mike, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. My name's Mike, and I work for the federal government in the behavior detection department. I'm not going to say what agency I work at because it's a rather large agency, and I just rather not mention it. But I've been with them since 2008. I've been doing it for quite some time. It's really interesting, and we'll talk a lot about what we saw in the keepers and a lot of good stuff. I grew up in Boston by an Irish family, Catholic, went to the Catholic elementary schools, went to the Catholic high schools. My dad, he worked 2 jobs, hard-working guy, blue collar, and my mom did as well. And it was very important back then to go to the Catholic school. It was expected of you, especially if you were from an Irish family. My dad would drill it into us, you are going to go to the Catholic school and you are going to do well. And if we didn't do well, then we got the repercussions of the leather strap. I was a quiet kid growing up in the Catholic school, and I was also left-handed. I was, let's just say, disciplined a lot for being that, because the belief back then in the school I went to was if you were left-handed, that was the instrument of the devil. And that left hand was not going to be used. They would take off my necktie during class and tie it behind my back. And then they would beat my hand because I couldn't write legibly with my right hand. So that made a sense. These were the nuns, by the way, the Sisters of St. Joseph. And I can relate to Ted Nugent saying, I think he was taught by the Sacred Sisters of Misery or something like that. And it was very similar. But I endured all that abuse by the nuns physically. I can't compare myself, not even close to what the people like in the keepers were subjected to, not even close. The Catholic culture, I totally understand it. It was really brutal at times. And there were one instance when I was walking to school and I was so terrified that I didn't study for a math test. And I was only in 5th grade. So I turned around, it was snowing out, and I turned around and told my friends I forgot my book, and I went back to my house and it was locked up. Everyone was at work. So I huddled behind the garage in a snowstorm. And luckily my mom got home from work early that day. And she saw my footprint and she went behind the garage and she went back there. And there I was crying, terrified. She asked me what was wrong, and I told her. And the next day, she said, tomorrow we're going up to see her. And my mom was that type of woman who wasn't going to take it anymore. So she marched me up there to the Mother Superior's office, had me sit outside her office. She didn't make an appointment. My mom was a smoker. She had a smoke going that day as we went into the school. And it was ultimately her demise because she died of lung cancer a few years back. She was great, and I really miss her. But she whipped open the door to the Mother Superior's office, and she was sitting behind her desk. And my mom put both hands on her desk, leaned over, took the biggest drag of her cigarette and blew it in Sister Superior's face and said, if you ever touch my son again, if you ever beat him for being a left-hand, because his dad's a left-hander, and his grandfather was a left-hander. And if you ever touch him again, I'm sending his father up here and you're going to hear from our lawyer. And she grabbed me by the hand and off we went. After that, it kind of died down again, but after a few months, it picked right back up again. And to this day, I'll still see a nun somewhere in town or whatever, or at an airport, and I get this nauseous feeling, and like I start getting all these stress. Unbelievable. But, like I said, it was a culture, and that it was accepted. It was accepted almost by the parents, but not by my mom at that point. And then I moved on to Catholic high school, taught by the Franciscan friars. It was a total male high school, and they wore the ropes. And there was this one brother who was notorious. He had a 3-inch bolt at the end of his rope. And if you were taking a test and you glanced aside for some reason, not necessarily to see your neighbor's answers, and he saw you, that bolt was going to whack you upside the head and you were going to be bleeding. And many kids bled out during class and got blood stains all over their chest. It was unbelievable. It was quite the experience, the discipline. And one gentleman gave one of the brothers lip one day, one of the students asked him to see him in the coat room. And you heard lockers smashing, and he came out with a bloody nose, bloody lip, and a black eye. And nothing was said. He just sat down in his seat and went about his day. It was incredible. And I still my wife can tell you, I can still get a little emotional when I talk about it. It's just, and that was way back in 1960. I went to grade school from 65 to into the early 70s and then high school. And I got out, I went to college and off I went. Didn't like it. It wasn't for me. And so I joined the United States Navy. I did 6 years of active duty, saw the world. I was in the 6th Fleet, USS Nimitz Battle Group. I went overseas to the Indian Ocean, the Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf area of operations. In one particular deployment, we were over there for 7 months and we were on our way back home and they said, oh, we have to be diverted to a little island called Grenada and we're going to be heading down there. So we took part in that operation down. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was back in the 80s.
Mike, I do. I'm way older. I'm older than everybody else in the world. And I went to Catholic school too for grade school, and I can vouch for some of what you said. I remember the rulers with the metal edge.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That metal edge was used on a lot of knuckles. I know that.
Oh, sure. You know, I'd go to the chalkboard also to bring this. I forgot to mention this. I was left-handed again, but they would take my hand with a piece of chalk in it and just continuously beat it against the slate chalkboard. Continuously. And then there was this girl in my class and she raised her hand to go to the ladies' room and we were doing a test and they said, no, you can't get up till you're done with the test. And she literally urinated in her chair. They made her sit there for 45 minutes in it. Didn't let her go. And in numerous instances like that. It was heartbreaking when you think back on it. As a kid, you were terrified. But as an adult now, you're like, gosh, I can't believe I survived that.
I guess that explains why you went into behavior detection, huh?
Yeah.
You know what's coming.
But so yeah, I got out of the Navy and I started my own business. I did finish carpentry. I did pretty well. And then when the downturn in the economy came in 2008, I needed to find a job with benefits that really couldn't afford it anymore. And this kind of coincided with 9/11. So I was like, I'm too old to go back in the military, but I want to do something, help my country, protect my country. So I saw an ad for an entry-level position for the federal government in this certain agency. So I applied. I had I was honorably discharged veteran. I don't know if you know, when you apply for federal jobs, if you did prior military service, you get a preference. So if you have to take a test, you get 5 points above everyone else. So if I got a 90 and another guy got a 90, I would be preferred because I have those 5 extra points. So I got accepted into this agency. It wasn't the behavior detection right away. I was working for a few years and then but I applied for this position in the behavior detection analysis. So I applied for that. I was accepted, did the testing and all that, and got sent away to train out in LA. And then once I got my certification and all that, and I did all the training, I went to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center as an evaluator for a new behavior detection program they were going to pilot. And I was down there for a while doing that. And then this program has evolved a lot over the years. There's new things added, new subject matter added, but it's actually modeled, taken. I don't know. You probably know about how the Israelis do it. The Israelis are world renowned for their behavior detection. They're amazing. And this one gentleman worked with the Israelis for many years and learned their program, and they brought it to the U.S. and introduced it to the federal government, and they piloted the program actually in Boston. Boston was the first place they piloted the program. So it works. It's scientific based. It works. I've seen it. I've caught people who are up to suspicious activity, everything including pre-terrorist activity, to drugs, to child pornography, to all kinds of stuff. And just based on their behaviors, just watching and observing them and them getting to a threshold, that's when we pull them wherever we observe them at, wherever it may be, a public venue, an airport, marathon, of any public event, fireworks displays, stuff like that. So we'll find out, and They'll be carrying bags with them sometimes, and we'll find things in their bags, and we can find these people just based on their behaviors and what they're up to. So it's pretty amazing. So it spread to different agencies across the country at that point. I also did some training in the Reed Institute of Interrogation and Interview. Really great program that they go around the country and teach all local law enforcement about behavior detection. And it was funny. We were in class. We go to it to get refresher training, and the instructor saves us for last and says, and you guys, all you law enforcement guys, probably don't know about these guys, but they're out there, and you can be in any public venue or any transportation venue, cruise ship terminals, subways, rail stations, and they're observing you. They're watching you for any indicators they can observe. And if you're showing signs of stress, fear, deception, they're going to pick it up. And these guys are my favorite guys. Out of all you guys, these guys are my favorite. So it's pretty cool to hear that from this world famous Reed Institute of Interview and Interrogation. And I continue to do it to this day. I love what I do, and it really works. It's a great thing. And I can even use it on my wife, Amy. Just the other day, I said, did you pay that electric bill? And she was in the kitchen and she wouldn't make eye contact with me. She's gazing down, fidgeting with everything. And I'm like, you didn't pay it, did you? And she's, no, I didn't pay it. So I caught her red-handed, being deceptive. So it's interesting.
That is fascinating. I wish I was 50 years younger and could go into that field. Oh my gosh. That sounds, I never even knew that. I guess I knew that people were trained in that, but I never knew that it actually had a name, behavior detection.
The general public really doesn't know about it. That's kind of why I don't want to mention the agency and everything. It's called another layer of security, basically, that people are out there, especially at large public events where there's numerous people and if someone's up to no good, wants to do something bad to a large number of people. It's good to have those people in place watching for it.
So, Mike, we're going to have you use your education, knowledge, and experience because we would like to know what all information you've learned by watching the interviews that are shared in The Keepers. So, for listeners out there that are listening, we are going to give you timestamps so that you can watch the certain specific parts of The Keepers that we're going to be discussing. So at those points in time, you're going to be able to pause the podcast if you would like to watch that before we discuss it. So Mike, let's go ahead and jump in and tell me about the first timestamp and what happens in that scene.
I want to explain to the viewers what actually is the steps and what we look for and when we're interviewing people. So behavior detection analysis, there's over 100 indicators of stress, fear, and deception that we look for. Every person out there has a baseline. It's the way they act every day of their lives. Aside from being stressed out about going to a meeting or whatever that is, your normal baseline, how you act. Deviation, that's what we look for. We look for a deviation. That's a change from a person's baseline. And they can show this through numerous ways. They can show it through microfacials. Microfacials, 1 to 4 second expressions on their face. They can show signs of contempt. They can show, I don't want to be talking to you. Sadness. They can show guilt. They can show deception. There's all types of microfacials, and they're very hard to spot. They're really quick. Some of them are easy to spot. It depends on the person if they keep it on their face long enough. For instance, when someone looks surprised, the eyebrows go up, the mouth opens a little, their eyes are wide. That's what a microfacial is. And these behaviors, these indicators that we look for stress, fear, and deception, they can't be controlled. You can think you can control them, but you cannot. We call somewhere on your body, these are involuntary responses to these situations. Somewhere on your body, they're going to leak out. And in the department, in the trade, we call it leakage. So leakage is going to come out some way. You can try to hold these in, but somewhere on your body, whether it's through your eyes, through your foot, through your feet, through your hand, anywhere, through your breathing, they're going to come out. And I can't stress enough how hard it is to spot some of them. I've had the training, and it's easy for me now after so many years. I know people in your audience will probably question probably going to be I'm not a detective. I'm not an investigator. My job is to spot these indicators, to spot them and then move forward. And if it involves getting them involved with law enforcement or a detective investigator, then that'll progress that way. But my job is to get them to that point, to find out their story, what they're up to. And I know there's going to be a lot of armchair investigators out there saying, no, that's because he's old, that's because he's nervous. But trust me, I know what to look for and I know what it's like a given. Yeah, that's not relevant because he's not being asked a question. I've done it, like I said, for a long time, and the government uses it because it works, and I know it does. So just wanted to explain that. That's what we look for. And basically a person's deviation from their normal behavior, their normal daily activity. The human body cannot hide this stuff. Cannot. And that's it. That explains it. That's pretty much what I do. So you can move on to episode 1. It involves Jerry Koob. Jerry Koob at 1807, he motions his head no while saying it was a typical day at the retreat house. Verbal message does not match the physical gesture. That's one of the indicators that we look for. You can answer a yes question, but your head will be nodding no, or vice versa. But he said that, so I caught that in saying, so basically, your mind flicked. It's saying, no, it wasn't a typical day, but he's nodding no and shaking his head no, but saying it was typical. But he's saying something wasn't. I don't know what curtailed. I'm just telling you guys what I observed through him. That's a sign of deception. That's one of our deception indicators. So the next one is at 1933 in the same episode 1. This isn't necessarily an indicator, but I didn't understand. It's kind of a gray area too. I don't think anybody knows the answer, but they listened to Sister Ruffing for 45 minutes to an hour. And I was just wondering, what did they talk about for that long? We can move on to at 3958. On the episode 1, when we're still on episode 1. The guy mentioned this to Gemma earlier, the way he shaked her hand, the rigid posture and very stiff way he was going about it. It says, I don't want to get too close. I don't want to tell you anything. It's a sign. It's a standoff sign. I don't want you to be here is what he's saying with that body language, but I'll be cordial and shake your hand. But I'm very uncomfortable. I'm stressed out. I don't want to be asked any questions and just let's get this over with. But at 3958, you can see that. And Gemma, you said you were nervous, right?
Not nervous, but I didn't know what I know about him now when I met him. But I really didn't trust him from the beginning. His wife was hating every second of us being there.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, visibly. Like she's not in the episode, but she was not a happy camper at all. I guess I was more trying to his comfort level was more important than mine because I knew why I was there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Here's another one at 4054. And this one's pretty good. It's called overly specific details. When he described the type of dump it was, like he went into way too much detail. It was it wasn't a big dump. It was a place where you burn debris. It was a place where you dump household items. There's no need to know all that information. It looked like it was a dump. That's all you had to say. And an overly specific response like that is another sign, an indicator of deception. He wants you to believe that, oh yeah, it's no big deal. It's just a dump, and I can describe it for you because I know everything. And I seem like the nice guy. I'm going to explain what it looked like. And I'm overly specific. So you're telling us too much information. Yeah. He's trying to, when someone's overly specific as opposed to lacking details, like he could say, oh yeah, it was just a dump. What kind of dump? Then you ask those questions, but he just laid it all out where no one could ask questions. It was a small dump, household debris, place where people burn stuff. Why do we need to know that? There's no need. He's just trying to be deceptionist, steer you away, give you this long answer. So deception class right there.
The other thing I can add that did not show up in the keepers is that when our director said to him, what do you think of all these young girls who were saying they were abused by the same priest, he said, I don't believe it. And our director, Ryan White, said, why would they all make up the same story? And he said, teenagers, they like attention. The listeners or the viewers didn't see that when he just came out with, there were no maggots or anything, he was not asked about that. That came out of the blue. And we had seen the autopsy, and I have a feeling he has too, but he made sure that statement, there were no maggots or anything, was on the record. And I'm thinking, why is he?
That's volunteering, not being overly specific again. Like, we didn't ask you that, but you volunteered it. So another sign of deception. And at 41:23, he's doing what we call the self-soothing gesture. He's holding his arm, rubbing it gently. That indicates stress. He's being asked questions. I don't have exactly the question he was asked, but that's the timestamp. So you'll be able to see him doing that. And that's a stress indicator. He doesn't want to be there. So he's trying to calm himself by doing a calming gesture, a self-soothing gesture. And that's one of those, is rubbing your arm like that or grabbing on it. Kind of a half across your chest type thing. He's just got the one arm over and he's kind of rubbing his arm. Textbook, again, stress indicator. So he didn't want to be asking these questions. So he's basically just calming himself down.
That's a great catch, Mike. So what you're saying is him rubbing his arm, was that just because he was uncomfortable with the questions being asked? Is that what your opinion is?
Exactly. So this next one, and I hate to say excited because no disrespect to anyone or any of the survivors of these people, their family members or anything, but this one was blowing my mind when I saw it. And I hate to use the word a lot, but textbook, because it is. It's called memory reanimation. What memory reanimation is, when you're telling about a crime that was committed, you're actually acting it out. You're telling it like another person did it, but you're making the motion that you were part of this crime. When Scannell, and let me just reference this out of one of our books we have. And the interrogator should be sure to keep an eye on the subject's hands when he begins to describe a crime or the crime scene, his alibi or an alibi. In case some subjects at this point subconsciously demonstrate visual information with their hand. The interviewer should not be surprised to see a subject inadvertently reenact what he did with a weapon or action during the commission of a crime. The interviewer may see the subject reenact the drawing of a gun, the stabbing with a knife, choking actions with the hands, and other behavior. So what Scannell did, when he's sitting in that SUV, he was talking about the condition of the body and all that, and that she had been there for a while. But what he did is he made the motion of stripping down her top. He made that motion. You can see his hands go up, and like he did. So my belief, my opinion, I believe that Scannell was probably helped to stage this crime scene after they moved it, or the first time, I don't know. But he made that motion in a classic memory reanimation. He didn't know he was doing it. He was telling it, and he just made the motion. And if you watch that at 42:27, it's one of the best indicators of Scannell's involvement, I think, in my opinion, of what he did, how he was involved in it. It's involuntary. You can't help it. Your body just does it. Reanimate the whole thing in your people have seen people being interviewed or interrogated, making a stabbing motion, like the book said, choking motions, punching someone. They're not saying they did it, but their subconscious is letting you know they had either did it or had a part in it. So that was pretty amazing to pick that one up.
Mike, with you picking that up from him reenacting, would you theorize that maybe he had some involvement in positioning her there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And again, I have to keep saying that it's my opinion, but him doing that and all the other indicators I picked up on, there's a couple more as we'll be wrapping up episode 1 soon, but there's a couple more. But absolutely, I think he knew, whether he helped stage Cathy after they after the first time when Masking brought Jean there, or the second time when they actually left her at the dump. I believe that they wanted it to look like she was sexually assaulted. So they pulled her top down and whatever, pulled their skirt up or whatever they did. That's what I believe, because it's just memory reanimation. It's just right there. When I believed he definitely had a part in it, because he knew Masking. He was his buddy, and he was probably one of his lean-up guys. And there's a couple more of them we have to get to too.
Yeah. Mike, I just want to add really quick, hearing you talk about this, Gemma and I, we've discussed this case in detail many times. And I know for a fact that both of us have talked before about how Cathy was found with her top down. But now that you mention how he was making that movement, I've never seen this and I've never done it. But when I talk about that, I never reenact it. So that was a very good catch of yours.
And especially, everybody talks with their hands. My mom was Italian and used to have to duck out of her way when she was telling a story. Her hands would be flying everywhere. But when you're talking about something like this, and he's very rigid, Chanel, I would say he's borderline sociopath, this guy. He doesn't really show too much emotion. He's very rigid. He's got this dead look in his eye. I don't know what I noticed when the camera just about cut out, he was in the window of the SUV and he had this look in his eye like it was just, I'm just going to say plain evil. It was just plain evil look. And it was like a dead look. He had a dead look in his eyes. Just, yeah, I can't even explain it. It's kind of it can send a shiver through your spine, that look. But my opinion, absolutely. And he was the cop. He knew how to do it. He knew if other investigators were going to look around, he knew how to do it, what they would be looking for. And so I think he helped stage Cathy's body. Absolutely. Don't know if he was exactly involved in the action of killing her, but yeah.
I want to watch all 7 episodes now, right this minute. I've seen the whole thing probably, I don't know, a dozen times, and I must have missed an awful lot now that I know what I'm looking for. The other thing that a lot of people don't understand is that he was a lieutenant, and they did not typically work on Saturdays, and they did a rotation, and there were a whole bunch of guys that could have been working that day, but he was the one that just happened to be working that day.
And it's funny because, and I don't know how, there's a lot of editing, obviously, and a lot of these behaviors manifest themselves when you're being asked a question. So a lot of these videos were probably cut for time, obviously. So I'm sure there were a lot more indicators that were laid on the editing floor. So it would have been great to have seen the whole thing, but obviously you won't be able to do that. But I'm sure there were a lot more indicators to observe.
700 hours, Mike.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure there were many.
700 hours filmed and had to be whittled down to 7 hours.
Wow, that's a lot.
So, uh-huh.
In that same timestamp with Canal, when I'm about the reanimation, he mentions the condition of the body. And he says the condition of the body indicated that she was there for a while. And then later on, he says she hadn't deteriorated or anything. And there were no maggots. She was there for a while. I would assume that deterioration had started, right?
Mm-hmm.
She was there for a while, as he said. It kind of contradicts itself. Like, what are you saying? I don't get that part. He goes back on his words, basically. And all right. So you had any other questions about that one? We can move to 4450, episode 1 still. Another thing, this is another pretty good one. He uses the word truthful as he's talking. Truthful. That's an indicator that we look for when trying to be too good. They're saying truthfully. And the other ones like, I swear on a stack of Bible, on my mother's grave, stuff like that. On my children, I swear I didn't do it. And he's saying truthful. That's just another indicator saying, I want you guys to know that I'm telling the truth because I'm stressing and I'm being truthful. And that's another one. It's called a denial flag. They call them denial flag. And when people use those words or phrases, they're just like trying to convince you, hey, I didn't do it because I'm being truthful. I'm being truthful to you guys. I swear on a stack of Bible. So he used that one, which is a very strong link to deception. Very strong. Those denial flags. And so that moved on to 4452, which he gives evasive, vague answers, inconsistent. Like he said, you were talking to him and you said, could you ask anyone at the police station? He says, they would know me, but the people would. What does that mean? So it's a big vague, very vague, and it's a null answer too. So it's all three of them in one, actually. So it's called a behavior cluster. So that was just a lie. He probably knows people that could have helped you, but he didn't want to. They didn't know me, but the people would know me. What people? I don't get it. That was like puzzling now. Even when you offered to give him a crab cake, he didn't go for it.
I know. Go figure.
So any questions about any of those?
I'm just so intrigued. This is fascinating.
Yeah. And there's even better ones. I can tell you that right now.
From this point forward, Mike will be referring to timestamps in episode 2.
So at 4813, it's an instance with Coop. Again, this is one of Coop's weaknesses he uses a lot. His verbal message doesn't match the physical gesture. Again, he uses this, which again is another sign of deception. He states, we were soulmates as his head motion. No, that's what he quoted at that timestamp, 4813. Don't have the whole conversation, but when he says, oh, we were soulmates, his head saying, no, we weren't. But his verbal message is saying, oh yeah, we were. So another sign of deception right there. One of the biggest one, your mind saying, say this, but your subconscious is saying other thing. So it's saying, no, we weren't soulmates, but my voice is saying, yeah, we were. Again, I think these are all 4834 timestamp. This one was difficult to call. You have to really watch his hand. So I'm going to assume this is what he did because I could see his fingertips and the motion of his hands coming together. It's called steepling. You basically put your fingers together and move them around, make a TP shape, like a church steeple. That's why we call it steepling. Steepling of the hand. He's attempting that. He's showing that he's open. Like, I'm telling you guys the truth. I want to be cooperative. But actually, it's a sign of deception as he's trying to show, I'm telling you guys the truth, but I'm more superior than you. I'm telling you what I'm telling you is that. So yeah, he's trying to be superior in this conversation. He's trying to be, this is what this gesture signals. Like, I'm telling you, be open, but this is fast. This is what I'm telling you, it's the truth. So he's steepling his hand. You can just see it at the bottom of the clip, but you have to really watch for it because you can see his fingers coming together. At 49, he's crossing his arms, touching his face, covering his mouth when speaking, and gazing upward. It's called a behavioral cluster, and it's all stress indicators. Every one of those I just mentioned, stress indicator. And that, when you get a cluster like that, is when you really have to look at this guy and what he's talking about, because he's obviously under major stress. He's obviously trying to hide it, but again, he's leaking from every part of his body, and he can't take it. And with Coop, he doesn't show anything. But this time, and his verbal message things, but he's pretty stoic. He's pretty upright and most of the time, and he shows nothing in his facial expressions. Microfacials, nothing. He's pretty stone-faced, but he's flipped a few times. So that's what I observed at that point. At 49:52, again, he's got his arms crossed, which is a soothing motion, but he's stressed. He's covering his mouth when speaking. Fast eye blink rate. Let's talk about that. When he asked Cathy to be his wife and she said no, watch his eyes. They blink really fast, followed by a normal rate. So that's a stress indicator for him. That's a sore spot for him. Like, he's actually stressed out about it. And it could be actually fast eye blink rate is what we call a double dipper. Double dipper is, it can be a stress rate, stress factor, and a deception factor. So it's a double dipper. There's 13 of them that do that. 13 indicators that we call double dippers. It depends on the situation. So I believe he's stressed and he's very standoffish about this whole subject about asking Cathy to marry him, and she refused. Do you guys have any questions about that?
You were mentioning how in most of the things that you pick up from Jerry Koob, they were stress indicators. Now, with your experience, Could someone be expressing those things when they're recounting a tragedy of some kind?
Yes, absolutely. You have to take into consideration what the situation is. He's one-on-one with an interviewer. So yeah, they can be indicated that he's upset about this but it's still, see what we say, you can't resolve an indicator by saying, oh, he went through trauma or he went through this horrible situation. He loved this girl and she refused to marry him, but you can't resolve it because you have to dig deeper to find out what's going on. So one of our cardinal rules is do not resolve a behavior. You can resolve a behavior, say if an old gentleman walked up to you and one of our indicators is trembling, and this gentleman obviously has some type of medical issue like Parkinson's, you can see it. You can see the whole body Parkinson's tremble. When somebody's talking to you and they're putting their hand up to their face and their hand is trembling, it's different. And you can see it might not be observed by a normal person, but someone who has been trained to watch it can know the difference. So to resolve a behavior, not necessarily a good thing, you just have to let it play out.
Jerry Koob passed 2 polygraph tests, and the guy that was with him, Peter McKeon, also took a polygraph and passed it. And they were given the polygraph tests on 2 different days. So McKeon was not on the same day as Jerry. So to me, that's like, I'm not a cop, but that sounds like I'd question that because they were buddies. The other thing is if McKeon has fallen off the radar because he's changed his number and doesn't answer the phone. He's elderly. But as Marilyn said in The Keepers, he sounded very scripted and he told like the whole story from beginning to end. Now, is it possible for people who are sociopaths or psychopaths to pass a polygraph?
Yeah, I believe they are. And also, let me point out that they took them, what year was it?
1969.
Okay, 69. So I don't put much trust in polys back then. I'm sure they worked to a point, but I wouldn't. Even today, I don't even trust polys because just for an example, a friend of mine, straight up guy, never been in trouble in his life. He worked with us, because you can't be in trouble. You can't have any kind of record or anything to get these positions in the government. They totally investigate you. There's like a thing, it's like 86 pages you have to do in background. So this guy would stand up and I think he was going for some position in the customs and border protection or whatever it was. He failed the polygraph. And this was like 2 years ago. I'm like, what do you mean you failed? Because I failed the polygraph. Like, what? But you're like the most honest guy, ex-Marine, honorably discharged, family guy. No, he failed it. So I don't put much trust in polygraphs, to tell you the truth. And also what you mentioned that they did it on different days and they were friends. If you rehearse stories and possible answers with each other, you're going to be a lot calmer when you take a poly because you know your buddy's going to say the same thing. They probably went over all types of scenarios.
And if the police were involved, if they're administering the polygraph. And for example, Cathy's car was processed at the same district station where Scannell was lieutenant and all his cop buddies who we've been told were in abuse all worked. So that's where they took the car to be processed. And it was processed as a missing person case, not a homicide.
Yeah, it's funny. Amy was like, where is that cop parked on the Keepers? I'm like, it's probably in the police, inspection bay. Yeah, it's like the pot calling the kettle black. Yeah, we'll give you the poly and you guys passed. Okay, you're good. In episode 3, actually, there was nothing.
So, Mike, what you're saying is during episode 2 and 3, at any point where you saw survivors talking about their experiences, we don't have timestamps for those because, in your opinion, it seemed like everyone did not show signs of deception.
Yeah. So people will say, did any of the victims show any indicators? And actually, I watched a lot of the victims talking and stuff, and they really didn't. Because they're being honest. There's no reason people are stressed out. They're telling their story. They might get emotional or something, but that's not anything but yeah. So when someone's being truthful like that and they're telling their experience, they're not going to show any indicators. Like I said, they might get emotional. They might get a little stressed, but you know why? because they're telling you their story. And that's what we want to get out of people, their story. But when they're being deceptive, they don't want to tell the story. They're going to show these signs of deception. No signs of deception, no fear, maybe some stress because obviously it was a stressful experience for them, but no fear, no nothing. We were just like, yeah, I was told my wife was sitting there watching me. I didn't get anything out of those episodes. So yeah.